Today, the coroner faced the task of deciphering complicated engineering evidence on the Workers' Club collapse. New Zealand structural engineer Kevin Spring took the stand, with his explanation centring on inadequate and brittle support to the club's western brick wall. He agreed that a building designed for earthquake conditions would have had some other mechanism of support. In earlier evidence, it was heard no earthquake codes were in place when the Workers' Club extensions were built in the early 1970s. The engineers concluded that the western wall's failure pushed the balcony and first floor beyond their capacity. They then gave way, with each floor below collapsing in turn. Mr Spring told the coroner engineers could design a building to sustain earthquakes, but added that without a seismic background, he would have probably done the same as the average engineer. After lengthy technical evidence, the inquest returned once again to the human face of the tragedy. Nurse Leslie Elvin heard of the Workers' Club collapse on a neighbour's police band radio. On the scene within 20 minutes, she and two doctors treated Albert Bender as he lay trapped in the rubble in the basement. As they worked, debris continued to fall and collapsed sections of the concrete were still moving and settling. Late this afternoon, the commander of the Newcastle Police Rescue Squad took the stand with his account of the events at the Workers' Club during the 4-day operation. Sergeant Ronald Gibson said the actions taken and the decisions made were the correct ones, given the dangers faced by rescuers. He said his convictions were strengthened with the final result, with no injuries to any rescuer during the operation. Sergeant Gibson will face cross-examination tomorrow. Leslie Robinson for NBN News.
Few would be surprised to see Robert Lovell captured this way, the artist at work with his brush and easel. However, there is another far less high-profile face of Robert Lovett, the Bushy. That passion for the country is the driving force behind his latest collection, based on the rich rural history of the Upper Hunter. The 32 pieces, which will spend the remainder of July on display at the Cooks Hill Gallery, are his most recent work, created when he took up his brush 2 years ago and set off to recreate the valley. Man and horse have a strong influence. Several pieces depict scenes from a spell with a team of drovers on Kerry Packer's famous property, Elliston. Titled In the Wet, this portrait of Elliston, taken during the big wet earlier this year, is the most expensive piece, with a price tag of almost $10,000. There are also scenes from the other great property Belltrees, as well as others at Gundy, Middlebrook and Whidden Valley. There's a strong contrast in the works. Many focus on light to create an atmosphere of being there, while others are for sharper and concentrate on action. The exhibition, in fact, covers all faces of the hunter with a handful of coastal scenes.
Sess Waters purchased the farm at Culnura in 1976. Over the past 14 years, he's trained his 3 sons, Dean, Guy and Troy, to be world-class boxers. The place they call home is far from luxurious. The outdoor ring was built by Sess himself, and much of the property is shared with more than 40 dogs and other animals taken in by the family over the years. Speaking from the farm today, Sess explained that the property had to be sold to meet the terms of the divorce settlement with his wife. That marriage faltered with the shotgun death of Central Coast horse trainer Alan Hall, who was allegedly having an affair with Waters' wife. Sess and son Dean were accused of Hall's murder, but were cleared when a magistrate dismissed the charges last year. Sess says Troy Waters' world title fight in Brisbane later this year would have met the divorce costs and asked his ex-wife to hold off settlement until then. Sess hopes the sale will raise $400,000.
Professor Graham Vimpani is an expert on childhood injuries. He believes with more information on how youngsters get hurt, it will be possible to avoid the accident risk. Other states have conducted research and now New South Wales is about to follow suit. The Child and Family Health Service is planning a survey of 4 casualty emergency centres at Royal Newcastle Hospital, the Mater, Wallsend and Belmont.
So it's just to get a broader understanding of the various sorts of injuries that children suffer, so that we can then do things about preventing them.
Researchers already have a broad picture of childhood accidents. Not surprisingly, winter sports result in an upsurge of injuries, but the playing field isn't the only hazard.
We know that 50% of accidents to children occur in the home environment. And there's already some work going on in the Maitland area looking at ways in which those accidents could be reduced.
But to gather wider details, health workers will consult with parents. When an injured child is treated in a hospital, parents will be asked to fill in details of the accident. The reporting system should be in place later this year, but results could take 6 more months to compile.
The report paints a grim picture of the financial costs and personal hardships being experienced 6 months after the earthquake. At the end of June, 10 people in Newcastle were homeless and living in temporary accommodation. According to Family and Community Services, most of them are waiting urgent repairs to their homes. The Disaster Relief Centre has received almost 940 calls for assistance, or an average of 50 calls a week. 161 buildings have been demolished in the city, with another 170 partially pulled down. 3 of those razed had a heritage listing. The Lord Mayor's earthquake appeal is also mentioned in the report. Of the $6.7 million received in donations, 467 claims have been processed, an all-up payout of $1.3 million. About 40,000 insurance claims have been received at the rate of 100 a day. So far, $175 million has been paid out. At the end of next year, the Insurance Council expects a total payout to reach $880 million. But according to Newcastle City Council, earthquake rebuilding may be reduced dramatically because of new legislation introduced by the state government. City Hall is seeking an urgent meeting with Local Government Minister David Hay over the ruling, which requires the council to give neighbours 14 days notice to respond to any work next door. The council estimates applications on earthquake rebuilding could now take 20 days or more to process instead of 24 hours. Jodie McKay for NBN News.
Coroner Kevin Wallace spent 1.5 hours in conference before the conciliatory gesture came, and it was the news he'd been calling for since the beginning of the inquest. Counsel for the Fire Brigade Craig Stewart read an official statement to the court, effectively declaring a tentative peace between the brigade and police. Rivalry between the two services was widely publicised earlier this year when an alleged report of a fire brigade debriefing was leaked to the media. Among the allegations, claims that tapping and calls for help at the Workers' Club weren't properly investigated, and that fire officers working with victims were ordered from the building without explanation. But today, Mr Stewart said the December 30 debriefing was a stress-releasing exercise, with heightened emotions and an exuberance of expression, going on to distance the fire brigade from publicity which arose from that meeting. As of today, the fire brigade's official line is that no victim died through any fault in rescue procedures. Neither the demolition of the western wall nor the decision to bypass heat-seeking cameras is held responsible for any of the 9 deaths. How would you describe relationships between the two services now?
Oh, I think that they're quite good. I have no reason to complain about them at all.
And the future?
Oh, I expect they'll even get even better.
But this afternoon there were signs that tensions are still smouldering in the brigade. District Officer Norman Parker said police and fire brigade activities seem to be based on totally different training logics. It seems police regard rescue workers' safety as paramount, he said. By limiting numbers of rescuers, they increase the risk to survivors. If the fire brigade applied the same philosophy, he said, firefighters would never reach the seat of a fire. The fire brigade officer told the court he didn't see the Workers' Club as a dangerous building, adding that the police were overly cautious. There was danger, he said, but it was danger we were able to handle. Mr Parker will undergo cross-examination from the bar table tomorrow. Leslie Robinson for NBN News.
A year ago, Commissioner Adrian Roden began investigating links between land deals and secret donations to the National Party. His 700-page report exposes a network of influence involving land developers, politicians and public officials. An overall picture emerged of people seeking improperly to influence the use and development of land for their own financial gain. And he finds actions by Deputy Premier Wal Murray and Natural Resources Minister Ian Causley created a climate conducive to corrupt conduct. But he specifically clears the Minister and the Deputy Premier of doing anything illegal.
The reality of it is that I'm here today totally cleared of any wrongdoing.
The ICAC investigation focused on whether big donations by developer Ocean Blue to the National Party had influenced decisions by Mr Murray and Mr Causley. Soon after they were elected, the government decided to release prime Crown land at Fingal for private development after a direct approach from Ocean Blue. The ICAC found the company did receive favoured treatment, but there was no evidence that Causley and Murray knew of the donations. But while government ministers have been cleared of corrupt conduct, the report names 18 people who should be considered for prosecution. The list includes 2 National Party MPs, a Shire councillor, lobbyists and senior management of Ocean Blue. Commissioner Roden says there's enough evidence to consider a charge of bribery against Don Beck, the National Party whip, and Don Page, the member for Ballina. National Party Secretary Jenny Gardner should also be considered for prosecution under the Election Funding Act. But Mr Murray can see no political problem.
The party damage is nil.
The simple fact is that this report represents a body blow to this government. Never again will the Premier be able to say that his is a squeaky clean administration.
A final decision on whether anyone could or should be charged rests with the Director of Public Prosecutions, Reg Blanche. Commissioner Roden recommends a complete overhaul of laws relating to political donations. So, as he put it, this comedy or tragedy of errors can never happen again.
Australia's soldiers are amongst the best trained in the world. The mock battle Kangaroo 89 in the rugged top end last year proved that. To tune in on this expertise, 19 defence students from Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore and Vanuatu are visiting Singleton Army Base for a 3-week course.
Australian Army training system is one of the best.
In what is called a defence cooperation scheme, the visitors are analysing Australian Army training methods, learning how to handle personnel and how to prepare troops for war.
What the bit that I look at mainly? Phone at the moment? That's great. I'll pop back later. When you want the pain to not be there. Yeah.
The Minister's decision to step into the lion's den of the Pacific Highway came on NBN's Newsnight program 3 weeks ago.
But I've got now slotted into the program an intention to drive the road again, yes.
Before setting out today, Mr Brown held a media conference to put his position on the highway. But while admitting the road has problems, he made it clear there would be no additional funding forthcoming beyond that already promised.
I've got no additional funds to put into the highway.
He did, however, say he'd be putting pressure on the New South Wales government to speed up planned improvements.
I will be insisting that if national taxpayers' money is going into that road, I want to see them doing things a bit faster than they've been doing it before.
Out on the road, Mr Brown said there was little argument that the highway is not up to the job. Inadequacies, such as the lack of turning lanes, were graphically demonstrated to the Minister's party. Over the next 3 days, the Minister and his departmental officers will complete the drive to Brisbane, looking in particular at hazardous sections highlighted in NBN's program Surviving the Pacific Highway. Sections like O'Sullivan's Gap, where the road is literally falling apart, while talk goes on about the possibility of a toll road bypass. Mr Brown says he'll be making a public report on his trip as soon as possible. Jim Sullivan, NBN News. At a media conference before Mr Brown's drive began, the issue of Coroner Waller's criticism of the highway was raised, and it became clear that the Minister feels the coroner has no role to play in road design.
Kevin Waller is no more a traffic engineer than I am. I take expert advice. He would be well advised to do the same thing.
The experts have been wrong in the past, though, about that highway over and over, Minister. I mean, should we really be having any confidence in the so-called experts any longer?
Well, I think we have to, Jim. They're the people upon whom we depend for advice. The alternative, Jim, to that...
Well, I think you'll see decisions made by experts that are in fact quite lethal as you drive up this highway today.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be so, and what we need to do, see, that's the responsibility, that's one of the principles of Western liberal democracy, is that elected people like myself and elected governments have the responsibility for making final decisions. We make those decisions on the basis of the advice available to us. But, well, a person like yourself, who knows traffic and understands the issues, you would be able to give me more advice than I would be able to provide for myself, because that's part of your expertise. And I take advice, and then I temper that advice in the light of my understanding of the responsibilities that I have, of course, to national taxpayers.
You spoke of higher priority areas than the Pacific Highway. What are they in light of the two fairly catastrophic bus accidents that have occurred there in recent times?
Well, you see, that most recent one, the one that involved both of them quite horrifying crashes, everyone accepts that, but the most recent one that involved the loss of 35 lives, that resulted from the quite remarkable coincidence of two coaches being at the same point at the same time when one of the drivers apparently went to sleep. It was not the cause of the road at all. There were two lanes there, and if the coaches had stayed on their own lane, that wouldn't have happened. There's no question. I don't deny, of course, that dual divided carriageways are important and they help to compensate for driver error. But when we talk about the Pacific Highway, we shouldn't think in terms of it as just being a one long continuous strip of road with equal priorities all the way along it. You know, that clearly isn't the case. There are some parts of the highway which should be now dual divided carriageway, and we'll be looking towards accelerating that type of construction. But there are others which, in terms of their priorities on the highway itself and in relation to other highways right across Australia, will be significantly improved by widening, by passing lanes, climbing lanes, turning lanes, improved grades and curves and visibility, improved signposting, whatever it happens to be, the duplication of bridges, and all of those things need to be done, but they need to be done on a priority basis. The implications of Coroner Waller's suggestion were that we should take money away from other roads, parts of which, or projects on which, have higher priority than possible projects on the Pacific Highway, and do the Pacific Highway first. Now that means that you would leave a more dangerous area to go to a less dangerous area. Now the point that I made about that was that while I don't doubt the goodwill at all of Coroner Waller, never would I doubt that goodwill. There was a lot of concern on the part of everyone. Coroner Waller simply was making quite foolish suggestions, and that was counterproductive. And if we take money away from more dangerous sections of roads in Australia and put them on less dangerous sections of the Pacific Highway, that creates even greater dangers.
Out on the road, the Minister taking the wheel of a rented Falcon to get a genuine first-hand look, he was quick to admit that many sections of the highway are not up to the job. At the Swan Bay turnoff, the Minister's party saw a graphic demonstration of the dangers of a lack of turning lanes, a typical hazard that occurs along the length of the highway. Over the next 3 days, the Minister and his party will look at hazardous sections, particularly those highlighted by the NBN program Surviving the Pacific Highway. Jim Sullivan, Newsnight.
Mrs. Rita York was born in the Singleton area in 1888. Her friends gathered in the Dangar wing of the Singleton Hospital to help her celebrate her 102nd birthday. Rita, though, was a little overwhelmed by all the fuss. So how do you feel about all this attention?
I'm not very keen on it. I don't like it very much.
Oh, but it's a big celebration for you.
Yes, it is.
She has 3 children, 4 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. Nurses say she's remarkably well for someone who's past their centenary. Rita says there's no secret to living a long, healthy life. She says she just lives one day at a time.
Police were called to the New Lambton shopping centre at about 2:30. The victim told police she'd just left the bank when 2 youths about 17 or 18 years of age rode their bicycles past her, snatching a purse from the top of a stroller. The purse contained $700, money that mother of 5, Adele Barlow, says could have been better spent.
For the next fortnight, make it extremely difficult. I've got no money for food, to pay my rent, which is behind actually, and my gas bill.
Adele has given police a good description of the youths.
The first one is dressed in a dark, possibly dark blue tracksuit. He has sandy shoulder-length hair. The second male's the same age, 17 to 19, blue acid-wash jeans and a faded blue t-shirt. Both of them are riding a larger than a BMX bike. We don't know the colour, just a faded aluminium type colour.
Police are warning shoppers that the bicycle bandits may be emboldened by this latest success and could well strike again.
Bureau of Statistics figures show the Central Coast